Welcome to the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers Spotlight on the Issues webinar series. I'm your host, Jason Modglin, the president of the Alliance. It is great to be with you today. The Texas Alliance of Energy Producers represents over 2,600 individuals and member companies that are focused on advancing independent operators and the standards of the Texas oil and gas industry. Through advocacy for smart energy and environmental policy, effective communications, and cost-saving insurance programs, the Alliance delivers for our members. I want to thank Noble Royalties for being our title sponsor today. As a leader in minerals and royalties since 1997, Noble remains committed to creative solutions for others who may be rethinking their risk tolerance. Now might be a good time to reset, rethink, and redeploy capital differently to adjust to this current market cycle. If so, we ask that you consider giving Noble Royalties a call to see if there's a solution to benefit your family or company. This year, the Alliance is celebrating our 90th anniversary. Founded in 1930 in Wichita Falls as the North Texas Oil and Gas Association, we merged with the West Central Texas Oil and Gas Association from Abilene in 2000 and expanded our focus statewide, adding members from across the state. While we celebrate our past, we are firmly focused on the future, delivering solutions for Texas independent operators. I would now like to call on our board chairman, Cy Wagner, to get us started. She is a dynamic leader, a second-generation oil producer, an Aggie petroleum engineer who is at the helm of her family's 40-year oil and gas business in Fort Worth. Cy, would you make a few remarks?
Thank you, Jason. On behalf of the board and the membership of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, I'd like to welcome Congressman Dan Crenshaw and all of our viewers. Congressman, what an honor and privilege to have you here with us today. As an independent operator myself, and on behalf of all of the members of our organization that work to fuel our economy here in Texas and the world, thank you for your efforts on our behalf. Amid the price war, COVID, and the misinformation out there about our industry, you've taken a strong, educated, and thoughtful stance for our oil and gas industry here in Texas. The Alliance is proud to work alongside you to represent the small mom and pop operators, the service companies, and the large publicly traded entities that our membership entails. Thank you to our board and members for joining in. We look forward to seeing all of you again soon in our next Spotlight on the Issues. We work hard to continue bringing you great events like this that keep you updated on the issues facing each of us and our businesses. And as always, thank you to Jason and Carr and the rest of the Alliance staff for your work in bringing this great event to our members. Let's get started.
Well, thank you, Cy, for your leadership, and thank you to the board members for joining us today. I think we're still trying to connect with the Congressman's office and get him on as a panelist, but I thought I would go through his very extensive resume. Originally from the Houston area, Representative Crenshaw is a proud sixth-generation Texan. From an early age, he wanted to serve his country with the most elite fighting force in history, the U.S. Navy SEALs. His father's career in the Texas oil and gas industry moved his family all over the world, including Ecuador and Colombia, where he attended high school. He served as a Navy SEAL for a decade, achieving the rank of lieutenant commander. After being wounded in Helmand province of Afghanistan in 2012, he lost his right eye and required surgery to save the vision in his left. But he refused to quit and went on to deploy twice more, first back to the Middle East and then to South Korea. He earned 2 Bronze Star medals, one with Valor, the Purple Heart, and the Navy Commendation Medal with Valor. Retiring from the military in 2016, he earned a Master of Public Administration from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government in 2017. Dan then returned to Houston to help his neighbors rebuild after Hurricane Harvey, and this inspired him to do more for his community. Dan and his wife Tara decided the best way to serve the people of Texas would be in elected office. In November 2018, Dan was elected to represent the people of Texas's 2nd Congressional District in Houston. In Congress, he was appointed to the Homeland Security Committee and Budget Committee. He was also named ranking member of the Oversight, Management, and the Accountability Subcommittee of the Homeland Security Committee. Through his work on these committees, he is focused on border security, disaster relief. We're getting an update from his staff. That's helpful. Thank you. Through his work on these committees, he is focused on border security, disaster relief funding, port security, cutting frivolous spending, and implementing fiscally responsible policies. Dan believes in service before self and understands that there is no higher calling than service to the American people. He brings integrity, leadership, vision, and the tenacity of the SEALs every day in his fight for common sense solutions in Congress. Thank you for being here. You have set a pace few have seen from freshman congressmen, actively engaged in bipartisan legislation on the Hill, very accessible to constituents and social media. You published a book this past April, Fortitude, and let me get it in the screen there. And you host a very successful podcast, Hold These Truths. And you even spoke at the Republican National Convention. So tell our members what drives you to serve and your priorities for the district.
Sure. Well, you know, it's a realization that there's a gap or a deficit in proper messaging and argumentation for our values, for the foundations that make this country great. And it's hard to articulate those foundations, what it means to be conservative, what it means to be American, what we share. It's very easy to tear these things down, especially when we don't teach civics properly. Especially when we don't teach people, why is a family good? Right? Why is a church good? Nobody knows how to answer that, frankly. If you're being attacked on that question, these are just examples, right? Because the other things, like why is a meritocracy good? Why is a free market good? The left makes a habit of attacking us on these things, which we thought we just all accepted as smart ideas, right? Smart foundations upon which to build a society. And we forgot to teach our kids to make the arguments for them. We thought we didn't have to, right? We thought that we'd eventually agreed on that. And conservatism is a bit of a disposition, right? And it's kind of an understanding that smart traditions and foundations are passed down almost unconsciously from generation to generation. It's built upon thousands of years of cultures and traditions and mannerisms that work, these values that tend to work. It's hard to explain why they work, but they do. And so it just turns out that we do have to explain over and over again why they work and teach every generation over and over again why they work. Why is a free market the best system? Why is it important to protect private property rights? Why is it important to let people and give people the incentive to work harder and then reward them when they work harder? Very basic stuff, right? Why is a republic a good form of government versus the mob democracy that Democrats seem to want? Not seem to want, they do want it. It's built into their platform. You know, abolish the Electoral College, add senators, abolish the filibuster, pack the Supreme Court. These are all movements towards pure power grabs. You know, and then centralize all of that power into one place, into Washington. You know, a republic is quite different. You know, why are these things good? And so I find that, because this job is not that enjoyable, but I find it fulfilling because it's so important that we do make those arguments. And it always seems like hyperbolic rhetoric to say this, but everything really is on the line. We do have a frighteningly large number of people in this country who are willing to vote away their freedoms, vote away their property, meaning vote away their money, just your property. There's a foundational belief that the government knows better what to do with your money than you do. There's people voting upon that value. It's a very strange thing. And you know, there's and then this question about whether America is even good or bad, or whether we should be teaching more anti-American history or less. Like to say that we're even having these discussions is odd, to say the least. And you know, that's why I get into it. That's why I do all this, because it's really about making the argument. We've got to bring people back to sanity, and these are insane times.
Well, they are, and part of the fuel for that has been COVID these past 6 months. You joined others in Congress passing legislation to fund state responses, provide personal protective equipment, and help businesses and Texas families weather this storm. Lately, you've drawn attention to this important work being done in Texas to develop and be able to mass produce a vaccine. Can you talk about that work and the ongoing work in Congress to overcome COVID-19?
Yeah. So year 2020 has exacerbated those differences in dispositions that I just referred to. There's the disposition on the left is always this: we care the most, so we'll take the most radical policy. This is the most radical policy is an indicator that we care the most. And if you disagree with us, it means you don't care. That's fundamentally how the left operates. And that was made abundantly clear in COVID. These lockdowns, I've always been against them. And now in hindsight, it's easy for me to say I was right. People still don't believe I'm right, though. People are still almost asking the government to tell them what to do, asking the government, please take away my freedom because I don't feel safe. That's an insane thing that we as Americans have been advocating for that. And so, it's this self-imposed harm that has occurred and then required us to spend trillions of dollars after the self-imposed harm. When what we should have done was invested that money in, and we did invest this money into hospitals and maybe additional hospital space. That would have been a smarter use of money. And again, not that we didn't do that, but we did it in addition to also destroying our own economy and then having to save our economy. It's hard to imagine a more foolish way to go about this. And yet that's what we did. So, we do need additional help now as a result. I think it still is better, even though it makes me cringe to think how much money we're spending. It is better to inject that help into the economy and keep the foundations healthy than it is to let it die. It's a better investment to do it now, but unfortunately, it's not up to me. We've got Nancy Pelosi who will not give the president any wins. That is the entire point of her delaying these negotiations. She can pretend all day long like it's not her delaying it, but even Wolf Blitzer won't accept that answer. So that should tell you something.
Absolutely.
CNN is always willing to repeat the Democrats' talking points ad nauseum. So it's very troubling times. It depends on the state you're in. We're much better positioned in Texas, just because we did not have these draconian lockdowns. But I've been traveling around a lot, and the vibe is very different depending on what part of the country you're in. It's crazy. You go to in the Northeast, especially. It's why are you wearing a mask alone in a park? I don't understand. It doesn't, or driving your car. This is the type of thing you see all the time. It's just a very different vibe, much more lockdown, high unemployment. Massachusetts, like 16% unemployment, and they sneer at us like we're the idiots. It's crazy. California is the same. It's almost 12% unemployment. New York is also very high unemployment. And, the idea that there's trade-offs is lost on these people, and it's devastating to Americans. It's been sad to see.
Absolutely. You and your staff reached out to the Alliance's Carr Ingham early in the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia to understand the impact to Texas independent oil and gas producers. Thank you for connecting with us and then turning around and calling on the administration to increase diplomatic efforts to prevent the economic dumping of fuel that was undercutting domestic producers. On oil and gas, how would you characterize the federal response to COVID? And you touched on the economic shutdowns, but the resulting oil collapse.
Well, we could have done more. I mean, I tried to get the administration to do more than it did. It's sort of, they kind of washed their hands of it once they thought they got that deal. And, we gave them a long list of things that they could do extra, but I think in the broader sense of just being overwhelmed by the entire problem, they did the things they could do. And there's also the left is just so ready to pounce on any kind of help to the oil and gas industry that there's political considerations too. Perhaps you know, so we talked to them about royalty relief, allowing at least mid-size and smaller producers to apply for royalty relief, which is possible. You should be able to do. I spoke with Secretary of Interior about, you got to make this process more understandable to these producers so they can do it, and I think they did that. You know, we talked about changing the banking, the loan. You know, the reserve-based lending measures, all of these things, changing up the loans. These are things you could have done at the administrative level to help it. We tried to get additional purchases into the strategic reserve, but Pelosi and the Democrats wouldn't go for that. So we you know, and you needed money to actually do it. The administration did what they could as far as allowing storage, but as far as purchasing into it, we weren't authorized to do that. Just goes to show how, I mean, the Democrats will kick this industry when it's down. So if you think they're going to help it when they take charge, and you know, there's a decent chance that happens, it's going to be really ugly. It's going to be really ugly. We're putting together some ideas for a video here soon where we get a bunch of oil and gas workers and just speak to the camera. Why do you want my job to disappear? Why do you want, your vote means my job disappears. You're voting for my job to disappear. It's never been more clear than now. There's a severe animosity from the left against anything that is fossil fuel related. To pretend otherwise is crazy. I think people who want to support Democrats but also support the oil and gas industry will take Joe Biden's words, "I'm not going to ban fracking," and say, see, they're going to be good for us. I'm sorry, guys. That's wishful thinking, and it's fundamentally not true. You know, because a few months ago we said the opposite. So they'll say whatever they need to say, first of all. Second of all, they're also saying no more permits. So that's a pretty big. So now you're putting the industry in a place where you have no predictability whatsoever. You know, what are you supposed to invest in? Who's going to invest in you? This is devastating, and we all know it. And to pretend otherwise is nuts. And you got to go out and tell your neighbors. You got to go and tell your neighbors that when they vote Democrat, they're voting for you not to have a job. It is that simple. And I hate to make it so partisan, but this people's lives are on the line here.
But that's absolutely right. I wanted to talk about flood mitigation, and Hurricane Harvey brought you back to Houston as part of those rebuilding efforts. It's been a major priority for you and your district. So what are you working on in that space to help Houston prepare for the next storm?
Yeah, so the administration has been great to work with on this. You know, we've been able to get FEMA to extend, for instance, the dredging in San Jacinto, get Army Corps of Engineers to redesignate some permitting and get Langham Creek desilted. The multiple large-scale studies are ongoing. We're going to be working to increase the length of time for input on the recent study on Addicks and Barker. There's been a lot of disappointment in how that turned out. So we need to look into that a little bit. But everybody has good intentions here, and everybody's working hard towards the same goal. It's our role has been making sure it's wrangled, all the different actors are on the same page, and to use our influence as necessary to make sure that we're all going in a constructive direction. So, you know, we also did some bipartisan amendments to get an additional $45 million of aid back into Houston. We had legislation that we were able to deal with the issue with a loophole where if you got an SBA loan, you weren't eligible for FEMA aid, stuff like that. You know, it's really just helping people still recover.
That's good. I grew up in the Bear Creek area, just north of Addicks, and so know your pressure and efforts there are helping. But many point to climate change as the source and intensity of flooding rather than the rapid development of Houston over the past several decades. Mm-hmm. You've taken a leadership role challenging the oil and gas industry, Republicans and conservatives, to not ignore a changing climate, but find ways to lead, adapt, and build our way out through technologies like carbon capture. Can you talk about your new energy frontier proposal and the solutions you want to see from the oil and gas industry?
Sure. So the new energy frontier is, I actually apply the term more broadly, but in legislation, what it means is repurposing some grant money in Department of Energy to focus on R&D, carbon capture for the natural gas space, as well as carbon utilization. So, this notion that carbon should really be a commodity instead of this pollutant as we see it. And then once it's a commodity, you can buy and sell it and trade it and capture it and utilize it. So that's that. But I think new energy frontier more broadly means rational environmentalism. It's an understanding that, okay, sure, you can make an argument with some computer models that Hurricane Harvey was, this percentage more rainfall because of climate change. You cannot prove this, but let's assume that it's true based on the computer model that they used to assume that. In the end, it's such a small reason for why we fled, though. And we just have to acknowledge that, and a more rational discussion by policymakers would be welcome. Democrats are not willing to have that rational discussion. You look at California, and there's not a single expert, by the way, that believes that climate change has any real impact on these fires. Yes, it's a little bit drier and hotter, and so you're going to have a little bit easier time catching fire. But overwhelmingly, all the experts agree the real reason is bad forest management and increased fuel on the forest floor.
Yep.
Overwhelming. This is not disputed, and yet the politicians there repeat something totally different, right? They repeat a completely other thing. Again, it's not untrue that it adds to the intensity, whether it's a hurricane or a forest fire, but it's such a small part of the equation. And for leaders to pretend like it's the end all be, it's the only thing we should be focusing on is deeply stupid. It's deeply stupid, and it's very irresponsible. It's irresponsible because it distracts us from actually focusing on what we could do to prevent this stuff. So there has to be a more rational path forward where we look at adaptation, which is our main effort, and it's something we can wrap our arms around. Okay, how do we adapt to more flooding? We can actually figure that out. Okay, if you reduced all carbon emissions to zero today, there is no promise that you're just going to have beautiful San Diego weather for the rest of the 100. It's just not what's going to happen. You're still going to have weather, and it's going to be intense weather. So this is the other thing. It's like, what benefit are you getting by destroying your economy and your energy capabilities? This is a really important question that has to be asked when you're talking about trade-offs. And policymakers don't like to ask these questions, right? They like to jump to the biggest headline maker, and it's usually climate change. Now, we can't. And so my point is the new energy frontier is rational environmentalism. It's do both. It's reduce carbon emissions because it seems like it's in our best interest to do that. But do it in a rational way with an understanding of what kind of costs and benefits you're applying here.
Well, and it's in contrast to what we see on the left, which is the Green New Deal and the proposals to shift oil and gas production, those jobs, and that innovation overseas. So it's I like the way you framed it at the beginning of these jobs disappearing, your vote making these jobs disappear. The Houston and our Gulf Coast are leading on LNG exports and finding ways to boost, sorry about that, got a phone ringing here, boost our allies through the export of clean energy, helping them to modernize their fleets with Texas natural gas. You've been around the world. Can you talk about the benefits of Houston as a global trade leader in replacing far dirtier fuels overseas?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my biggest arguments for why, if you implemented a Green New Deal right now, or a carbon tax, or one of these, anything that diminishes our ability to produce more and export more, you're increasing global emissions. This is the counterintuitive insight that we need to be telling people. You're increasing global emissions. Why? Because just because we decide to slap ourselves across the face doesn't mean that the rest of the world just all of a sudden needs less energy. No, they still have energy demand, and they're going to get it from somewhere. It's either us or Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, whoever it is. And none of those countries produce cleaner than we do. In fact, it's far dirtier. So the energy demand stays the same. The energy utilization stays the same. But it's just met by dirtier producers. That's the reality. And I don't know how our own policymakers don't understand this reality. And but we need to make the argument too. The reality is I've never heard anybody make that argument, and so I do. But
I'm glad you're doing it, because it's truly bizarre that demand here in the United States is not going away simply because we strangle the industry here. And you're absolutely right. We're shifting that production overseas. They're far dirtier, and also don't have the same environmental protections that we have here. So it's better to have a domestic oil and gas industry than shipping it overseas.
Exactly.
I really enjoyed Fortitude and the need to remind Americans of the importance of heroes and the value of hard work. In fact, I'm going to send a copy of the book to one lucky member today, Colleen Rita, with Surge operating in Houston. Our chair suggested our 12th man should be the winner today, and Colleen was number 12 on the registration list, so thanks for participating. Congressman, we seem to be stuck on demonizing and villainizing each other rather than identifying the goals and attributes we want to emulate and pass on to our kids. So you touch on this in your final chapter, but how do we correct that as Americans?
Well, I mean, there's a pretty low standard I think we could set for ourselves, which is just attack ideas instead of the intent and character of the person advocating for that idea. And I know that when I'm called a white supremacist Nazi by my opponents, that it's because they've run out of intellectual arguments and argumentation and facts to actually use, or they probably never had any. And we've got to avoid doing the same, but it doesn't mean we shy away from vigorous debate on the ideas. I certainly don't. And I have a huge problem with the ideas of my political opponents, for all the reasons I just stated. It's costing people their livelihoods. But the right balance between the left and the right, just generally speaking, and there is a good balance to be had. The right tends to favor tradition and institutions, and this idea that over time, almost unconsciously, good and decent cultural traditions and foundations have been passed down, right? This is sort of what makes us conservative. And there's a kind of a limiting principle to that. There's an understanding of what government can accomplish realistically. And the left is always looking for change. The left tends to believe that what is old is not necessarily good, and that we're in constant need of change. They also tend to put an emphasis on compassionate, caring causes. And there is a balance there, right? There's a decent balance to be had there. I think that balance is severely out of whack right now. Because if it's not put into a box by basic limiting principles, liberal principles, by the way, of maintaining free speech, equality under the law, universal principles, not principles that apply to one group or another, but universal principles. These are liberal principles, by the way. That we're defending. And so there's a healthy balance that's supposed to be had there. The left is good at pointing out, maybe injustices or causes that we should focus on, that the right is maybe too entrenched in the ways of doing things to see. That's a reason that we live together well. But when it comes to finding solutions for those problems, I think the right is always better suited to find the solutions, because we operate within a framework of limiting principles. And the left has no such limiting principles. The left is, we see that outcome, I will do whatever it takes to get the outcome. I don't care about the trade-offs. I don't care about the second, third order consequences. They tend to believe that the most radical policies indicate that you care the most. I would argue that it usually instead ends up with careless policies that do not take into account trade-offs and second, third order consequences. So But that's the balance. That's the balance that we should adhere to. And that's, I think, as Americans moving towards, would be a healthier coexistence.
Absolutely. Finally, you launched a viral campaign video with Texas Reloaded, already the greatest joint campaign ad in history, highlighting many Republicans running for open congressional seats in Texas. Can you talk about your efforts to build a Republican majority in the House?
Yeah, I mean, the video did exactly what we wanted it to do. Highlight some good candidates, highlight the kind of diversity and youthful vigor of the Republican Party in Texas, and raise a lot of money for those candidates. So, we'll try and do more of those over the coming years. It's a fun kind of project to embark upon. I would encourage you guys to support our state reps. That's a real battle that we need emergency support for to keep Texas on a good path. Because we're very close to losing the Texas State House, and then we definitely lose seats in Congress if we're not already going to lose them this election. So, everything's on the line here. I would really encourage people to get involved.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that, Congressman. On behalf of our members and my family, thank you for your continued service to our state and nation. Do you have any closing thoughts for our members?
No, hey, we've got your back. We'll be working hard. It's going to be an interesting few weeks. So, again, I would say get involved, make some phone calls. Maybe not everybody's used to getting involved in politics, but some of these elections will be decided by just a few votes. And get your neighbors out and go vote. It's really important.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you all.
Congressman Crenshaw can be found on the web at crenshawforcongress.com. He's on social media. I would highly recommend the podcast, Hold These Truths. And I strongly encourage you to pick up his book, again, Fortitude, American Resilience in the Era of Outrage. And thank you again to Noble Royalties for being our sponsor today. We ask that you consider Noble Royalties as you consider your business needs for your family or company. If you are interested in sponsoring future events, we want to hear from you. We will be back for our Alliance Roundtable on Monday, October 26th. So look for that invitation in your email. And thank you for joining us. Please be sure to fill out the exit survey so we can make these events even better. Have a great day.